What do you think was the key? How did they do this?
It all started about a year ago when Dave Aranda made a pretty bold move after just one season saying, we need to make a change at offensive coordinator, bringing in Grimes from BYU, and it's paid off in spades. This team looks like a totally different team offensively. They're ranked 17th nationally in yards per play, 9th fewest sacks allowed. Their rushing total, 150% better than they were last year, and they're still throwing at the same clip. So that move, a bold one and not a fun one to do, have to fire a guy after 1 year, has paid off big time.
Pete, how about you? What was the key?
To what Dan said, who's hiring the head coaches around here? I mean, you look at Matt Rule, you look at Dave Aranda. 2 times in 3 years, this team has gone to the conference title game, and both of those years they were picked to finish in the cellar. So that gives you an idea of the coaching job we're talking about. If there's a searching firm that actually works to hire these coaches, I think I need them in my life to help me hire some things around me. Yeah,
Chris?
And I think with that coach change, it's a culture change. Aranda came in here, and last year when things went wrong, they were pointing fingers. The defense blamed the offense. This year, especially you look at the Oklahoma State game earlier this year, defense gets 3 interceptions, offense can't get anything going. After the game, they said there was no pointing fingers, no discussions like that. They stayed as a team, and that's the Aranda effect.
Well, kind of to a combination from what you guys all just said, my key was that the offensive line is so much better this year. I think it was, it's been a weak spot since 2016. Last year they allowed 31 sacks in 9 games. This year just 12. That's the least in the conference. So I think that's allowed them to get their run game going where they needed to, and just the quarterback, could do his job a little bit better this year as Gary Bohannon made his first start this season. So I think offensive line, but that's a product of what you guys just talked about as well. And obviously, and Chris, we'll remember this from the beginning of the season. Dave Aranda had said that this offense was going to be built around the offensive line, and he's like, I know that's going to make you all nervous.
Yeah.
And it did. But I mean, they got right to it. They fixed what needed to be fixed in the trenches, and from there it just continued on with what a great turnaround it's been.
And I think what's been incredible about Aranda is he kind of has some interesting things he says. He talks a lot about we want to put our identity against theirs. And as the season went on, you started hearing the players saying that. I think the BYU game, we heard Terrell Bernard talking about putting our identity against their identity, and that just shows buying into what Aranda's doing. It's a little unorthodox, but clearly it works.
Well, that offensive line is going to be put to the test today. Oklahoma State, 49 sacks, a nationwide best. So they're going to have their work cut out for them. They're going to have to take it up like Darby said.
Well, it's probably the best front 7 they win against all year, and they got to do it again. When they forced those turnovers in Stillwater, it would be 3 and out afterwards. They weren't able to produce. You got to take advantage of those today and make something happen. And having a good offensive line. I mean, how many teams make it to this game if you don't have a good front 7 or front 4? It's part of what you have to have.
Yeah, Dave Aranda is definitely, like Chris said, just led such a big culture change at Baylor, and he's been a great fit for Baylor. And he's been someone that obviously when you do a turnaround from 2-7 to 10-2, other schools are going to start giving you interest, but he has said he fits well at Baylor. He said his quirkiness fits well at Baylor, which you got to love that he's honest about that. But, I mean, I think it starts with him. Then it started with him making, like you'd said earlier, the changes with Jeff Grimes, and then Eric Mateos coming in on those offensive roles. And, Dan, you touched on it earlier. Just what do you think it was about Jeff Grimes that was able to do such a great turnaround here?
The mentality, what you guys talked about a little bit, and just, it's schemes, too, and getting guys to buy into it. I mean, an aggressive running style that they saw work at BYU. I mean, Larry Fedora did not forget how to coach, but for whatever reason, it didn't work, didn't mesh with this staff, and I'll go back to it. I mean, that's not an easy conversation to have to say after 1 year, we got to make a change, but they did it, and, man, Grimes has been a perfect fit. Texas guy, just a great fit with Baylor.
Yeah, Chris, you'd followed him a little bit more at BYU with your Utah ties there, so you were really happy about Grimes coming.
I had some friends, some guys that I played Little League youth football with who reached out to me when they made the hire of Grimes and Mateos and said, you guys got a good one. What stuck out to me is you don't hear a lot about offensive line coaches, but that's what they said. They said everyone on this team loves Mateos. He was a defensive lineman. Usually the D-line, O-line kind of go head-to-head. He said he's someone that the guys love to play for. When you're an O-lineman, you don't get the glory. This is one of the first times you'll ever be talked about on a TV show, but when you have somebody you can rally, come together, and it's really changed this offense. He's given them that.
So 10-2 to get them here to AT&T Stadium. It's interesting. I feel like it slowly built up throughout the year where it was like, this team is legit. And I think we also were like, are they legit? Because they had that early loss in Stillwater somewhat early, and then that loss against TCU. But they found a way to make it here to the championship. What stuck out to you, Chris? I mean, we were at a lot of the games. Just in general, when you look back at the season, what's a big moment to you?
Well, I think the biggest moment for me was that you lose to TCU. You see how big of a deal that is. You're driving down. You could kick a game-winning field goal. You throw an interception, and all of a sudden you're out of it. And they showed up on Monday the same way they showed up after upsetting Iowa State. And that's something that Dave Aranda preaches, but it's another thing when you're actually doing it. And this team was able to just show up, whether they had a big win or a big loss, and just approach practice the exact same way.
And speaking of big losses, they lose Gary Bohannon to the hamstring injury. Not quite certain whether he'll play today. It's been a couple of minutes. We haven't talked about the quarterback situation. We're trying to figure out exactly whether he's going to play or not today. But I think that speaks to the culture. A huge turning point is Bohannon goes down, and this team really doesn't skip a beat. It's like they inspire from within, and I think that's a huge deal. The next man up mentality that comes with a coach like Dave Aranda, I think, builds championships.
Yeah.
Well, I think it starts with the head coach, too. I mean, Aranda and his staff didn't panic when that happened. They didn't just go conservative. When Shapen went in that game, they went right
you were telling me before the game.
I mean, right away. They went, and so, I mean, I kind of like that, that they went after it with the backup quarterback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it shows that they're prepared for Shapen. And, I will say, during the preseason, he had a real shot at getting that starting spot. I mean, they really like him. So I think for the future, they do really like him. Obviously, I think they want Gary to be playing today. Like you said, we're not totally sure. We do know he was going to start practicing on Monday and go from there. So we'll see. Chris will be back in the stadium later today, so we'll hopefully have an update on his warming up.
Yeah, we'll see how he looks. We remember last week he was dressed. People got excited, but just walking out on the field, you could tell there's no way he takes the field. So we'll see how his pregame warm-ups look and how much action he's getting out there.
Awesome. Well, coming up on Baylor Game Day, we're going to dive into that loss in Stillwater, see what happened there, and how the Bears can make some changes to hopefully get a different result today. And we are joined now by Brian Keating. He is a sports director at KOCO in Oklahoma City. He's covered Oklahoma State for 10 years. So to you, how did the Cowboys get to this game today?
Their defense is spectacular. It's one of the best defenses in all of college football. They get after the quarterback as well as anybody. They have disrupted the running game as well as anybody. And their offense has made just enough plays in a lot of different situations, including last week where their offense really got going in the first half. But they have played outstanding defense, and they've been a menace to every offense that they've gone against all year.
Anyone who's watched OSU from afar thinks, big-time offense. How did that transition happen?
Well, I think Mike made a decision a couple of years ago that he was going to give some more scholarships and some resources into that defense. And I think that's paid off. And I think, obviously, the hiring of Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator, has been outstanding. I mean, getting him from Duke, a lesser-known program, just kind of figured out how to do more with not the five-star defensive tackles. And his aggressive scheme has just worked. And with this defense, you're talking about a really veteran group, 21, 22, 23, a 24-year-old. And so he's been able to mesh those old guys who just know what to do and they know how to play football. That's been the difference.
Now, the two games that Baylor fans have paid attention to, of course, Baylor, Oklahoma State, and then Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, because we needed Oklahoma State to win that game.
Yep.
But in both games, the best way to describe it is they looked like they were trying to lose the game. Like the offense just had the struggles, the special teams. Yep. Is that something that they can clean up, or is it just that's how they play?
Well, to some degree, that's how they play. And the one thing, if you're an OSU fan or if you're a Baylor fan, you're thinking, how can we make Spencer Sanders have to beat us? And that's weird to say about the first team all Big 12 quarterback, right? But how can we make him have to sit in the pocket, make decisions, and throw the football? Because he is capable of making a lot of mistakes. And I will say in his last, 5 games, his last 168 passes, he's only thrown 3 interceptions. So he's reined that in. They've used his legs. But you're right. I mean, especially a week ago, the special teams miscue, the mistakes and the interceptions. If Oklahoma State can stay away from those kinds of things, I think they're the better football team. But they haven't always been able to do that, that's for sure.
And Jaylen Warren, he's just been really special this season, obviously. How, from someone that's watched him, what would Baylor need to do to maybe slow him down?
Well, he runs with such great pad level, and he's very thick and sturdy, and he just doesn't stop. And I think that's the thing. He changed their season. They found him at the Boise State game and gave it to him like 36 times. And so they did that for a few weeks. They've kind of reined him in some, but he's just a tough sucker, man. And if Oklahoma State can run the football, they're pretty tough.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Brian, thanks so much for joining us, giving us a little insight into the opponent today. We really appreciate it.
You got it.
Awesome, guys. All right, moving on. We have RG3 is actually going to talk to us. We talked to him earlier this week, so he is a great person to talk to because he was in the booth in this game in Stillwater. So we spoke with RG3 earlier this week. Obviously, you're a great person to talk to because you were in the booth in Stillwater. Just what do you remember most about that night and that game?
Yeah, I remember most that the offense, RVO wasn't able to get going. Everyone knows that in Stillwater it's really hard to play, but they were able to slow down Sanders, but they weren't able to slow down Jaylen Warren for the entire game. So I think that's going to be the battle to watch. But the Bears on offense, whether it's Gary or you got Chapin out there, have been really firing on all cylinders lately. And Abram Smith, in my opinion, should be a Heisman candidate for the way that he's played all year.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second, but first you mentioned Jaylen Warren, and just like you said, the run game, Baylor really didn't have an answer for that. They let up 219 yards, the most of any opponent this season. Just in your opinion, what's the key to making that, different this time around?
The one key is having Terrell Bernard out there, right? Him being back is going to be a major difference maker for the Bears. Just the tenacity that he comes with, the physicality, and the confidence. You heard Coach talk about it this week, that Bernard just brings a certain type of confidence for the rest of the guys around him. A win takes the Baylor Bears an extremely long way. And I think setting that tone on defense that they're not going to be able to run the ball, make them one-dimensional. I know talking to defensive coordinator Ron Roberts, that was the thing that they wanted to do going into the game. They didn't do it the last meeting they had. But sometimes in those rematches, things can go a different way, and I know all of Baylor Nation wants that to be the case.
I've seen your Heisman Trophy candidates and your rankings here, and you have had Abram Smith in there for a while. He moved from defense to offense. Just, it's pretty fun to watch him. Just what does he do that's so impressive to you?
Yeah, Darby, he didn't just move from defense to offense. He was on offense, moved to defense because there was an opportunity and a need, and then moved back to offense. So the guy's versatile. He runs with a determination, right? I say this on the air sometimes. You see a guy rushing like they're a family at the airport, not trying to miss their flight, and that's Abram Smith. He's got places to be, a place to go, and it's the end zone. And it really helps him having Tristan Ebner there as that 1-2 punch.
What's the key? What's the biggest thing Baylor has to do to get a win on Saturday?
First and foremost, that offensive line, which has been one of the most improved units in all of college football from last year to this year. They have to set the tone, because I believe in this game the most physical team will win. That's championship football. When you're going into a hostile environment like this, you got to pack your running game and you have to pack your defense. So if the Bears show up on defense and they pack that running game, win in the trenches, I think they'll win this bad boy.
All right, so on that note, what's your prediction? Who are you going with for this game?
Is that a serious question? Listen, I'm going to go with the Baylor Bears. I'm going to say they win the game 31-24.
So obviously RG3 is going with the Bears, but I did have to ask, just give him a chance. I don't know. He's an analyst now, so maybe he has a different perspective. You never know. But one thing he hit on there is that Terrell Bernard will be back in this game. He did not play in Stillwater, and he is, in my opinion, you watch him, and when we're watching him on the field, he talks to the rest of the guys. He is truly leading that defense all the time. I do think that will be a game changer, having him back up for this matchup.
I think it's a great point, because even if he were like at 80%, you'd still want him on the field for the reason you just mentioned right there. He's the, throw your cliche, and he's your point guard, he's your quarterback. I mean, he's your middle linebacker.
Yeah.
You want him on the field.
Yeah, you do.
I think his effect goes beyond the defense, too. I think this whole team rallies and looks to him, and being in Stillwater, seeing him on the bench in a tracksuit, I mean, it brought me down. I was watching it, just felt like, this isn't right. He's supposed to be out there leading this team.
Yeah, they had 3 turnovers without him, so hopefully maybe they could generate one more and like Dan said, maybe score points off of those turnovers
Yes.
in this game. I think another thing that we heard Robert Griffin talk about is Abram Smith. That's the guy that they want to get involved early and often. 30 carries last week. He gets better as the game goes on. And we talk about that game at Oklahoma State. They got down 14-0, and they can't afford to get down early against a team like Oklahoma State and a defense like that.
Yeah, he said Abram Smith looks like he's got to run through the airport with his family, trying to make his flight. He's definitely got to make a flight today. That's got to happen for a Baylor win. All right, we'll be right back, and we're going to talk to Baylor basketball coach Scott Drew. So Julie Hayes actually sat down with Coach Scott Drew. Obviously, that's someone knows a lot about winning, knows a lot about winning championships.
And by the way, you can't do a Baylor game day without Julie Hayes.
Exactly.
I mean, you can't.
Coach Scott Drew is riding high after that big national championship win. He started the season going 7-0 and says, considering that plus all the successes happening across Baylor athletics, it's a great time to be a Bear. This is Coach Scott Drew. Scott, thanks so much for being here with us.
Well, thanks, and I love that introduction. Baylor University has a lot to be proud of, and obviously we're very proud of what the guys accomplished last year.
Amazing start to your season. You're 7-0. You're coming off of a Thanksgiving tournament in the Bahamas win. You've moved up in the poll. You're in the top 5. Exciting way to start a new season.
Great way to start a new season, and I highly recommend it for anyone over Thanksgiving. It's a great way to celebrate Thanksgiving in the Bahamas and win the Battle for Landis tournament on national TV. So great Thanksgiving break for the Baylor Bears.
You talked about how great it is to have success really across the board at Baylor right now. The football team playing in a Big 12 championship game. Exciting for fans. Exciting for you, even as the basketball coach?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, at the end of the day, Coach Aranda's a great coach, but he's also a great neighbor. So on a personal note, definitely cheered for him. But I mean, football is the most recognizable sport. And when football wins, it helps the whole athletic department. It helps the university. And I love college football. So we get back from Atlantis, and we're watching the game on the bus. And then you got to stay up and cheer for Oklahoma State. And they wore me out, but you know what? We're in the championship game, and that's really, really exciting to it.
All right, before we let you go, Coach, any predictions for Oklahoma State? Baylor game, how it's going to turn out today?
Yeah, well, we're going to win this. The question is, are we going to win it in the fourth quarter late or not? And I think it's going to be a very close game, but I got us winning by 7.
There is a relationship between Dave Aranda and Coach Drew that goes off the floor.
Yeah, it does. Like he said in that interview, they are neighbors, so that's for one. But just also the connection of all the Baylor coaches right now, I think, is really great. And last year, actually, I'd heard that when Dave Aranda was kind of down and going through a tough season, Coach Drew was like, "Hey, I've been there." And we all know he was there at the beginning. And so I think he really lifted him up, and they created a great relationship last season. And now he's loving seeing him have success this year.
Well, and it's not just lip service of Scott Drew, too.
Yeah.
I mean, not every football coach in America is going to take the time to do that, but he is the dean of coaches at Baylor. He's got the clout. He's the guy that people are going to listen to, and I know for a fact he takes that seriously, his role in the athletic department as a whole, and that's pretty cool to see. Absolutely.
All right, coming up, we're going to dive into the journey of these seniors from the low to highs, the whole deal that they have gone through here at Baylor. Well, what these Baylor seniors have been through is pretty incredible, to say the least. Just the lows to the highs. Now they're back here, their senior year, playing for another Big 12 championship and hoping for a different result this time around. But just the dedication and the grind that they've put in here has just been pretty outstanding. And we mentioned, Jalen Petrie is one to really talk about, the one who stayed. He's the guy that is the only Art Browse recruit still on this team, and he's put in the time, and now they're here playing for a championship.
Yeah, it's guys like that who light the way for other players who may find themselves in times of doubt. And that's why I think this program has shown such resolve. He's kind of a microcosm of exactly what this program has been able to do, bouncing back year from year. The second time in 3 years, but the one in between wasn't so hot.
Yeah.
Well, and what they've been able to do is show that it's about the program, not necessarily about the coach. I mean, let's be clear. It's important that you have a good coach, but they've been 3 different coaches who've been able to see this group has shown that you can win at Baylor at a high level.
Yeah. Well, this is the third 10-win season since 2015 with 3 different head coaches. So that's credit to the players. Yeah. That's who that's credit to for sure. So just to go through it, they've been through a bunch of different records here: 1-11, 7-6, 2-7, and 10-2, all in the 4 years. Jalen Petrie, as we mentioned, he's the one they call the one who stayed for a reason. He also is the defensive player of the year. So how about that for putting in the time? He spoke about what a win would mean to this group today.
I would say that it would prove that hard work pays off. This group, this team has been through a lot. We've seen a lot, and we understand that we've worked hard throughout it all, and that if we come out with a win on Saturday, it will be big to, show a lot of the people around us and even guys all around the country that if you don't quit, that you will, reap the benefits that you sow.
Jalen Petrie is just such a solid person, and definitely he has put in the work, and now he's getting rewards. There are some other players that were given Big 12 awards as well. We'll go through some of those right now. So the defensive newcomer of the year, Apu Ika, coming from LSU. He's been pretty impressive. Special teams player of the year, Tristan Ebner. Offensive lineman of the year. Again, as we mentioned, I don't know if people would have thought Baylor was going to have an offensive lineman of the year, but that's Connor Galvin. So those guys all picked up individual awards, and then there were more that made the All Big 12 team and the second team from there. But yeah, obviously that's a statement that the league has noticed the individuals, they noticed the team, and it's again part of the big turnaround that we've seen.
You mentioned Tristan Ebner. That's a guy who I think will be a key to success, let's say, for Baylor. You mentioned him in the special teams game, catching passes out of the backfield last week. He's been doing it all since the start of last year, returning kickoffs and punts for touchdowns. So that's a guy that could really help Baylor out today.
Run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. Take the pressure off whoever's playing quarterback.
Yeah, Abram Smith, you like Abram Smith having a big day.
I do. I mean, that's what they need is Abram Smith. Yep.
And, of course, we're all here because Baylor's trying to win a Big 12 championship. They have won a couple of those in 2014 and 2013. That was before they had the Big 12 title game. They also had won some Southwest Conference titles back in the day as well. Well, it's easy to forget that at the beginning of this, before the season, I sat in a Senate committee meeting where they were trying to see what the future of the Big 12 was going to look like. Livingstone was in there, Mac Rhodes was in there, and Texas and OU were not very liked at the beginning of the beginning of the season, and now Big 12 teams are playing for the conference championship, so that's good to see.
Well, first time since 1998 in a Big 12 title game that Texas or OU will not be here appearing, so it is different in a lot of ways.
And, oh, by the way, you got Houston and Cincinnati playing in their conference title game to do. BYU had a heck of a season, so like you said, a lot different than when you were in that Senate meeting this summer.
Yeah, absolutely. But, yeah, like we said, it's BYU, UCF, Cincinnati, and Houston are joining no later than 2024-25. BYU joining in 2023. But they're already playing Baylor back-to-back here. It's just funny in that way, too. Cincinnati and Houston are playing in the American Athletic Championship, as you mentioned. So it looks like the future of the Big 12 is in good hands. Someone that was very involved in this process of what would the Big 12 look like moving forward was Baylor President Lyndon Livingstone. She has ties to both teams today, and Lauren Westbrook spoke with her about that.
Dr. Livingstone, a pleasure to be with you. Since you've been president at Baylor, you've been to one Big 12 championship with the football team. This is a little bit different. It's against your alma mater, even though you are decked out in green and gold. How are you feeling?
Well, Lauren, it's so exciting to be doing this again, especially after going through COVID and everything. And, of course, I'm thrilled that we're doing it against my alma mater. It's wonderful to be playing Oklahoma State. Of course, we want Baylor to win all the way, but it's going to be a fun weekend. We've got a great crowd going, a lot of students going. We're going to have a great time in Dallas.
You, along with a lot of other Baylor fans, were saying, go Oklahoma State. For just a little bit, and we saw your Twitter pictures. What was that like to be with your family for that moment and then change back into your green and gold?
Well, of course, we always want OSU to win when they're not playing Baylor, and so that was fun. And, of course, OSU-OU is a huge rivalry and always has been. So there's that part of it. We were just thrilled they won. But then the fact it had such an impact on Baylor and our ability to go to the championship game made it even more exciting. So we loved dressing in our orange for a couple hours there and then changing right back into our green to cheer for our Bears from there on.
What would you say to the student body as they travel to Dallas?
Well, first, we're really excited that we've got so many students going, and I would say cheer really loud from beginning to end, create a tremendous atmosphere at AT&T Stadium for our Baylor Bears.
Dr. Livingstone, thank you so much, and go Bears!
That's right, sick of Bears!
I absolutely loved that picture with them in the orange because that's the way everybody was last weekend, and now everything has changed. That's all back in the closet, far away.
That's right. All right, your useless trivia for the day. So both presidents of these schools are former college athletes. Of course, Lyndon Livingstone, a basketball player, Dr. Strum at Oklahoma State, a former college softball player. So it's kind of cool to see athletes leading both their schools. There's your useless trivia of the day.
Well, maybe less useless trivia coming up after this commercial break. Thanks, Dan. Well, the big question of the day is involving the quarterback position, whether it will be Gary Bohannon or Blake Shapen getting the start today. Of course, Gary Bohannon suffered a hamstring injury during the Kansas State game. That's when Shapen took over, and then Shapen got the start last week over Texas Tech. He completed 20 of 34 passes for 254 yards and 2 touchdowns, basically did enough for Baylor to beat the Red Raiders. Blake also took over, like I said, during that Kansas State game, but he looked pretty confident for just being thrown into the fire in that one. But Gary Bohannon is obviously who they would like to be playing today. We were told he did practice on Monday, and they were going to go from there. Chris Williams is inside the stadium. We're hoping maybe he could see some action going on in there or have a little bit of an update on the quarterback situation from inside. Chris?
Yeah, Darby, I was just looking over my shoulder because over the last 5 to 10 minutes, some players have been trickling out of the locker room. I've seen Blake Shapen come out. We've seen Kyron Drones, the third-string quarterback, come out and throw. I'm yet to see Gary Bohannon come out here to start warming up yet. I don't know if that's a sign. Maybe it takes a little extra time for him to get taped up. We saw him last week dressed with that hamstring taped really tight. What Aranda told us this week was that Gary Bohannon, it's not just can he take the field, can he safely take the field? And that means not just can he make the big play with his feet, can he protect himself with his feet? Does he have enough in his legs to be able to get away from taking a big hit? So it is about his safety. You were talking about Blake Shapen. The numbers do lie a little bit. He could have easily thrown 2 interceptions, and both of those could have been returned for touchdowns. One of them, Tyquan Thornton, able to break up. But you're right, he looked confident, and that's what they're going to need today against Oklahoma State. Come out not afraid to throw the ball because they weren't able to throw the ball against the Cowboys last time. That is definitely going to be the strategy this time. But Darby, we'll keep an eye out. I'll see if Gary comes out here and starts throwing the ball around and see how he is when he trots out of the locker room.
All right, Chris, thanks. So obviously, it's a lot of speculation, but if Kyron's out there, Shapen's out there, Gary's not out there yet, that's definitely something to watch. We don't know what that means.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
I know.
This is championship game drama right here. This is as exciting as it gets, and a cloud of mystery now hovers over us, Dan.
And I know people within the organization were hopeful that he could go this week, and like you mentioned, they were going to try and practice, but if you step back, hamstring injuries take a while, and it was a pretty pain. You could tell by his reaction. It was a serious injury. You would not have expected him to be ready for this game. And Shapen, like you mentioned, was more than competent both times he's played. So it's not like woe is me if Bohannon can't play today.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem is in the red zone. I think Shapen, he's not a threat on his feet in the red zone. Gary was. That's been Baylor's biggest red zone threat this season. And I think obviously defenses have to prepare for Gary to run if he's in there. They don't have to do that with Shapen. I think that's why the Bears had to settle for more field goals with him on the field.
And by the way, we're talking about, I think, the third best defense in the nation. And as far as points per game, they're fifth, only giving up 16 points. So you cannot trade field goals for touchdowns or touchdowns for field goals. You've got to get 7 or 6 when you get in the red zone.
And luckily, Grimes and his staff know that. And I guarantee they're trying to put things in that Shapen is comfortable with in the red zone because they know they need to perform in the red zone. They want to, too.
Yeah.
So I guarantee that's been a point of emphasis this week.
And how about the fact, one more thing, I mean, we are coming down the wire right now, and it seems like Oklahoma State and that vaunted defense doesn't know who they're going to be playing under center. That helps Baylor out a little bit as far as a preparation standpoint for the Cowboys.
Oh, it's a little mind game, too.
Sure.
There's no doubt.
Well, I spoke with a couple of insiders this week, the Sean Bell, the quarterback coach's sons, and they gave us their view on the game and maybe a little bit of a hint. They gave some tips for Gary, so listen to that.
I'm Cannon. I'm Braxton. Sean Bell. He's a quarterback coach. When we beat Oklahoma, he can go first.
Jalen Petrie, JT Woods, Gary Bohannon, Blake Shapen.
Mine's Gary Bohannon. Because he's really nice to me. Whenever he's hyped whenever we win. You're actually there. I remember when they scored the last play.
It was an away game, and it was our second away game of the season. No, third, I mean.
I was mad.
Well, we played Georgia, right?
No, that was Oklahoma.
Oh, yeah. They beat us in the regular season and at Cameron Stadium.
We just rooted for the opposing team. Now we're playing against them. The score is going to be 30-21. We just won the Big 12. We won the Big 12.
Aim good.
Throw hard. Well, he's not playing.
I was talking about Gary.
And sick 'em, Bears.
Chris Williams is actually still inside the stadium. So, Chris, the players were out there warming up when we talked with you last. Hadn't seen Gary. Do you have an update on that?
Yeah, Darby, Elvis is in the building. Gary Bohannon came out and warmed up. And if I move over, you'll see him, the yellow hood coming out of the back right there. That's Gary Bohannon in the end zone, throwing some warm-ups. You see him doing full dropbacks. Get a little disrupted there, but getting the full warm-up here. So we saw him do that last week. Doesn't necessarily mean he'll be playing in this game, but it is a good sign that he's out here getting warmed up. It's a step up from what we saw earlier. We'll keep an eye on him, see if he comes out fully dressed.
Well, Gary's warming up. That could be a key. We'll have our keys to the game coming up after the break. Well, Dan, we'll start with you. What does Baylor need to do today to get a win?
Make Spencer Sanders beat you with his arm. Now, he's a good quarterback. I'm not saying he can't make plays, but if you force him to throw the ball a lot, he is capable of making some bad decisions. Now, unlike in Stillwater, you force those turnovers, you got to convert those to points this time around. But make Spencer Sanders beat you with his arm.
Pete?
Jalen Warren, you got to keep him in check. If you can keep Jalen Warren in check, you can keep yourself from getting behind early. He ran for 125 yards the last time these two teams played. You got to keep him quiet. He's been quiet of late. They got to keep that going.
Kickoffs at 11. We will have coverage tonight at 10. Thanks so much for joining us for Baylor Game Day from AT&T Stadium.